it's easy to forget that for most of history, everything moved at the pace of a walking human. Today, we don't even think about distance because we built ways to ignore it. But in the past, distance was the ultimate boss. It dictated how far you could go, what you could carry, and how fast you could react when things went sideways. Civilization was already up and running long before anyone actually rode a horse. People were already farming, trading, and building towns. But those early societies had a physical ceiling. If you can only move as fast as your own legs, your world stays very small. Humans did try to speed things up, though. They used oxen to pull heavy loads, but they were slow and needed constant breaks. Donkeys were better for long hauls in the heat, but they didn't exactly help you respond to an emergency. Different places had different fixes. Camels for the desert, dogs, and reindeer for the snow. These worked, but they were stuck in those specific climates. You couldn't take a sled dog into a forest or a camel into a swamp. So, while animals helped, they didn't solve the main problem. Travel was still slow, clunky, and completely dependent on the terrain. If a town was in trouble, the SOS arrived too late. If there was gold 100 miles away, it might as well have been on the moon. By the time news traveled, it was usually outdated or distorted. Attacks usually worked simply because the warning couldn't move faster than the invaders. It wasn't a lack of effort. It was just the reality of a world that moved at 3 miles per hour. Horses were around, but we didn't start riding them immediately. At first, we just hunted them for food. They were just another difficult, fast-moving meal. What changed things wasn't the horse's strength, but its temperament. They were smart enough to tolerate humans and follow routines. Eventually, we stopped meeting them with weapons and started meeting them with rope. But even then, there was a problem. Early wild horses were tiny. They were roughly the size of a modern pony, and their backs weren't strong enough to support a grown man for long distances. This is why, for over 1,000 years, we didn't ride horses. We hitched them to carts and chariots instead. It was a clever workaround. The horse provided the engine, but the wheels supported the weight of the person. To get to the point where we could actually sit on them, we had to become the world's first genetic engineers. Through selective breeding, humans spent centuries choosing the largest and strongest horses to reproduce. We were literally redesigning the animal's skeleton and muscle structure over generations. Eventually, horses grew large enough that we could finally ditch the chariot and sit directly on their backs. This domestication was a slow process, first controlling, then carrying packs, and finally, someone realized they could just sit on the animal. Riding didn't change the world overnight. The first riders were probably clumsy and unstable, but it was enough to tip the scales. A rider could see further, travel longer, and get home with energy to spare. It wasn't a dramatic shift, it was just a practical one. But even with a larger horse, riding was unstable until a tiny invention changed everything: the stirrup. Before the stirrup, riding was like balancing on a moving barrel. You had to grip the horse tightly with your legs just to stay on, which meant you couldn't use your hands for much. The stirrup gave the rider a ground to stand on while moving. It locked the rider into the saddle, allowing them to use bows or lances without falling off. This simple piece of metal turned the horse into a shock weapon that could charge through lines. It was the stirrup, combined with centuries of breeding, that finally allowed heavy cavalry to dominate history. For a long time, it was just a tool, like a better hammer. Herding got easier, and hunters could finally keep up with faster prey. But as more people started riding, the advantages started to stack up. It saved time and energy, and eventually, people realized that being faster than your neighbor was a huge advantage in a fight. Before this, war was a slow-motion affair. Armies marched on foot, and supplies crawled behind them in carts. Battles happened close to home because if you went too far, you lost coordination. You just showed up and hoped for the best. Horses changed that by giving commanders a choice. If you're faster, you get to decide when and where the fight happens. You can scout ahead, test the enemy, and leave before they can trap you. The first war horses were actually used for chariots in places like Egypt and Mesopotamia. They were mobile platforms that let leaders see the whole field and let archers shoot from places foot soldiers couldn't reach. Eventually, people bred horses strong enough to carry a person directly, which was much more flexible than a chariot. Cavalry could move independently, which completely threw the old fixed battle line strategy out the window. Mounted archers were the ultimate nightmare. They could pepper an army with arrows and ride away before anyone could hit back. The people who lived on the steppe perfected this. They grew up on horses, meaning they didn't need roads or camps. Their armies were 100% mobile. Distance couldn't protect you anymore because a steppe army could appear from nowhere, retreat, and then counterattack in the same hour. By the time the Mongols showed up, this was a science. Every soldier had multiple horses, swapping them out when one got tired. They could cover massive distances without stopping, using mounted messengers to keep the whole army in sync. They didn't win because they had more people. They won because they could outmaneuver and isolate anyone slower than them. It wasn't just brute force, it was control over time. Eventually, this mobility changed how we organized our whole world, especially on the grasslands. A single rider could carry a message that was too urgent to walk. The world didn't actually get smaller, but the edges of it felt softer because we could finally bridge the gaps. Civilizations realized that speed was the key to managing a large society. A leader who gets news faster can plan better, and communities that stay in touch can actually cooperate. While some were using horses for messages, the steppe cultures were using them for their identity. Riding wasn't just a hobby, it was life. In an open landscape, you had to move to survive. Kids learned to ride before they could even walk. If you could ride, you were a valuable part of the group. Being that close to horses meant they understood the animals' weirdest habits, like how they sleep. Horses don't sleep like we do. They can rest while standing up because of a mechanical trick. They have a system of ligaments in their legs that locks their joints in place. This lets them support their weight without using their muscles. If you see a horse with its head down and eyes half closed, it's just power napping. But they still need deep REM sleep, and for that, they have to lie down. They only do this for a few minutes at a time, maybe an hour total per day. They'll get what they need and pop right back up. Lying down is dangerous for a prey animal, so they evolved to stay ready to bolt at a second's notice. If you see a horse flat on its side, it means it feels incredibly safe. Understanding these details is what made the steppe groups so effective. They didn't need cities. They thrived on motion. Their wealth was their herd, and their safety was their ability to see a threat and move. When they hit settled societies, the difference was jarring. To a farmer in a village, the steppe riders seemed like ghosts that appeared and vanished instantly. But for the riders, that was just a normal Tuesday. Groups like the Scythians or the Huns didn't learn war. They just applied their daily life to it. The biggest change, though, was connection. Suddenly, movement and coordination were reliable. Take the Mongols. People think they won because they were a horde of millions. In reality, the unified Mongol Empire didn't even last that long, barely a century. It started in the early 1200s with Genghis Khan and quickly split into smaller pieces. There weren't actually that many Mongols, only a few million at most. They ruled over hundreds of millions of people who were already living in China or Persia. At their peak, they controlled about 25% of the world. They didn't do this by replacing people. They did it by building a system of horse-based communication and trade that kept everyone linked under one law. Because of these connections, trade routes exploded. Information started moving, and the unknown parts of the world became familiar. The Silk Road wasn't one single road. It was a web of paths made possible because horses made the distance bearable. Paper, medicine, and new ways of working metal all started flowing between cultures. Change didn't happen because millions of people moved. It happened because a few people could move back and forth constantly. Horses were the first high-speed link between disconnected worlds. This changed governance forever. Before, a king was just a local guy. He had no way to know what was happening at his borders. With mounted couriers, he could react to a problem before the news became old. It didn't make everything perfect, but it stopped the world from feeling like a chaotic, disconnected mess. Distance was no longer a wall. It was a hurdle you could plan for. We eventually linked horses with power and authority, but that's just because they extended what we were capable of. They let us see more and do more than we ever could on foot. Over time, the horse became part of our fabric, but it was a slow burn. We didn't discover speed. We learned it slowly, like a new language. Eventually, engines replaced the horse. But the world we live in today was built on the template the horse created. Our need to move farther and talk faster started with them. Horses didn't make us smarter, but they made us reachable. And in a world built on connection, reach is everything. Civilization would have happened without them, but it would have been slower and lonelier. Horses didn't lead us. They just helped us find each other a lot sooner. So guys, can you like this video so YouTube will show this video to other people? Or watch this video on screen? This is still one of my most popular videos. Let me know in the comment why it was popular. I've been trying to grow this channel for over a year with no luck. So, if you're a curious person, subscribe.